Hey guys, how you doing? This is Keyon Corniffe, also known as Mr. Finance, and I just want to welcome you guys to our financial overview today. Today we're going to be talking about ways that you can save your future and how to really start to put together a financial goal with a plan so that way you can start winning the money game. This is the main focus. This is the main thing, so that way you could understand how to have a financial goal and how to put together a financial plan and action. It's almost saying that knowing the why, right? Knowing why you need to do this, but more importantly, knowing the how. It's like saying understanding the knowledge, right? So that way you can take the necessary actions to start winning the money game. So this is what we're going to be talking about today: how to save your future, why you got to save your future, and what's important about saving your future. Today we got to start focusing on that, and what must we do? So let's jump right into it, right? So the first thing we got to understand about saving our future is understanding the four things, right? Four things you got to learn. Four things you got to understand. You got to understand, number one, how to make money. Number two, you got to understand how to save your money. Number three, you got to learn how to actually grow your money. And number four, you got to learn how to protect your money. Now, in order for you to really start winning the money game, you got to understand these four things. And until you learn all four, because guess what? We already learned the first two. We learned how to save and make money. The problem is no one ever teaches us how to properly grow and how to properly protect our money. And that's the reason why it's important to create what's called a financial foundation. So think about building a house, right? Think about building a house. When you're building a house, do you build your house with the roof first? Absolutely not. You start with a solid financial foundation. So the first thing when it comes to building up your financial foundation, what you must do is you got to, number one, you got to put together proper protection. You got to put together proper protection. And it's important to have proper protection in place so that way you can protect your family and yourself against three events that you can't predict when they're going to happen to you. Now, these three events that you can never predict when they will happen to you is, number one, you can't predict when you're going to die. And if you could predict when you're going to die, please do not tell me when I'm going to die. I want that one to be a secret to me as well. All right. Number two, you can't predict when you're going to have a health problems. You can't predict that. You can't predict when you're going to get sick. When the last time you could predict when you're going to get sick? You can't predict when you're going to have a disability. When are you going to predict that you're going to be disabled? You can't walk, you can't function. When can you predict that? So these three events is three life-threatening events that you can't predict when they come and actually present themselves to you and your family. So what must we have in place, right? Because the problem is, we understand what the problem is, but let's talk about the solution to these problems. Now, the thing that you got to ask yourself is, before you prematurely die, do you have these four things in place? Do you currently have these four things in place? Do you currently have life insurance against premature death? Do you have final expense insurance? Do you currently have a will, a trust? Do you currently have these three things done? These are the three things you need to have in place so that way you can put yourself in a winning position and be properly protected against premature death. Now, when it comes to health problems, right, and planning against being sick, what kind of health insurance do you have? Do you have an HMO or do you have a PPO? It doesn't matter what company it's with. It's a matter of, do you have an HMO or a PPO? Do you know which companies to stay within your network? Do you understand what is your co-pays? Do you understand what is your deductible? Do you understand how that works? It's important for us to learn these things so that way we don't acquire what's called debt. All right, medical debt, because we never understand what's our co-pays and what is our deductibles, and do we have an HMO and do we have a PPO, and who is in our network that we should be going to. The next thing when it comes to disability, you got to make sure that you have something called long-term care in place. You got to understand why you need long-term care. Now, when it comes to long-term care, here's what you got to understand. Long-term care is there to help pay for the cost of living assistance. So now, do you have a friend that is a CNA? Do you have someone that works and actually go out there and help families and assist them while they're going through what's called challenges? Now, they said that you need long-term care in place because if you can't do 2 daily acts of living out of this. Now, let's talk about the daily acts of living. We're talking about if you can't feed yourself, if you can't clothe yourself, if you can't transport yourself, if you can't toilet in yourself. These are things that you may need an assistant for. The question is, can you afford to pay this out of pocket? And that's the reason why you need long-term care to be in place. So once again, all of these things need to be done as soon as possible to make sure that you and your family have proper protection. These are services that we also provide to you. So that way you learn, but you also get provided these services as well. Now, when it comes to debt management, you got to know how to manage your debt. Okay. Now, one of the things I love to tell people is that, hey, there's no such thing as being debt-free in America. There's no such thing as being debt-free in America. It's all about managing your debt. And the reason why you got to pay focus on mostly on how to manage your debt is that debt is something that keeps acquiring. You got to put yourself in a position where you don't acquire more debt, but you can learn how to pay down your debt. So that's why we teach families how to make a list of their debts. Learn about the APRs, learn about the interest rates, learn about the minimum payments, and then pay attention to how much you're paying. And we show you ways how to pay off your debt much faster by teaching you a strategy of how to pay down your debts much quicker. Now, when it also comes to emergency fund, do you currently have 3 to 6 months of income put to the side? We got to learn how to put together 3 to 6 months of emergency funds to the side for emergencies. And the way that we do so is by learning how to live on a budget. It's important for us to learn how to budget because budgeting is not tracking spending. Let me make that very clear. Tracking your spending is not budgeting. Budgeting is 2 things. You got to know how to save and how much you can spend before you do either one of them. That's what budgeting is all about. And that's something we're going to teach you. Now, on top of this, you're going to learn about investments. Now, before you start to invest your money or save your money, you got to understand 2 things. You got to understand 2 things about investment. You got to know what is your risk tolerance. You got to know the difference between being an aggressive, moderate growth, or a conservative investor. You got to know the difference. And then you got to also understand the 3 ways your money gets taxed when you need it upon distribution. Until you know what it means to be taxed now, later, or never, you don't understand where to put your money and save it properly. And that's why it's important to learn all of these fundamentals. Because let me talk about what they have taught us. They have taught us that we need to invest our money first. And once you invest your money first, 9 out of 10 times, you probably put it in a taxable or a tax deferred bracket, which means they got rules and restrictions. So now because there's rules and restrictions to money, when emergency happen, we tend to use our credit cards. And by using your credit cards, now you're in debt. And because you have acquired a lot of debt, and we have the tendency to want to pay off our debts, guess what? We now put the money towards the debt and fail to put together proper protection against disability, health problems, and premature death. We don't want families to continue building their debts upside down. That's why we're here to teach you how to put together your financial foundation and how to have a financial goal and really protect yourself in the right manner. Now, let's talk about the plan. Now, the plan for every family is that we want to teach you how to understand how money works. Our plan is to make and help every family to understand how money works. And in order for you to understand how money works, you need to understand how to build up your investments and grow your funds. Now, growing your wealth is learning the wealth formula. And the wealth formula is a simple formula where we talk about money plus time, plus or minus rate of return, minus inflation, minus tax. How's that equal wealth? Our goal is to teach you how to apply this thing and continue having money talks. Now, importantly, if you're going to learn the wealth formula, like I said, it says it takes money. You ever hear the saying, it takes money to make money? That's the reason why we got to teach you the wealth formula. Now, let's talk about the wealth formula a little bit. Now, in order for the wealth formula to work, we got to teach you a concept called pay yourself first. When the last time you paid yourself? We're so good at working to pay bills. When do you pay yourself first? When do you pay you, the worker, the person that's making the money, the moolah? You got to get paid first. And you got to understand how much do you pay yourself first? That's the reason why we got to teach you a budget, because you got to learn how much can you save and how much can you spend before you do either one of them. And that's the reason why, paying yourself first is a great concept that we want to teach you, so that way you can start finding the money to start putting to wealth formula to work for you. You got to also learn how to buy only what you need. You got to buy only what you need. And if you start making these small changes, the result is that you start having big money. Now, big money starts with saving $10 a day. Did you know if you were able to save $10 a day, $300 a month, and you do that for the next 30 years, you have actually $447,000+ if you have an average rate of return on your money of 8%. Think about that. Imagine if you're saving $20 a day, $600 a month. You do that for the next 30 years, get an average rate of return of 8%. You have $894,000+. Do you realize that these are big, sizable accounts that you could use to have a retirement fund? So the next time you spending $10 a day are spending $20 each day, just know you're spending anywhere from $500,000 to $900,000+. That's the effect of spending. And this is why we want to change that habit and help you to acquire more wealth within your lifetime so that way you can retire with a better lifestyle. So ultimately, here's the thing. We got to understand the effect of time. The effect of time. The thing is that we don't understand time. Because here's the thing. We look at time and we say, hey, time is money. All of us said this. Time is money. Time is money. But did you also know that procrastination is the enemy of savings? Let me give you an example. I'm going to give you an example of someone that could start early or someone that wants to wait later. Let's say that you were 25 years old and you and your friend got an opportunity to see this video or actually looked over this overview and said, man, good information. Your friend decided that I'm going to start saving, say, $3,600 a year. And your friend did this for the first 7 years. You waited and said, no, let me see how it works for you first. Let me know how it goes. 7 years later, you saw that your friend started making some serious money in their portfolio. You said, oh man, I want to jump in now. You're starting 7 years later. Now, 7 years later, you put in the same thing, $3,600, and both of you want to retire 48 years old. Now at 48 years old, your friend put in the $3,600 for the first 7 years. He made a total contribution of $25,200. By the time he's 48 years old, he would now have $128,361. He only contributed for 7 years. Now, because you waited later, you had to contribute $61,200 to only have $131,221. So what does that tell you? That tells you that it costs to wait because time is money and procrastination is the enemy to saving. You can't procrastinate because your money needs time to grow. Don't be a procrastinator when it comes to saving for your retirement and your future. So that's the ultimate reason why we encourage people to save. Now, the reason why the formula says plus or minus rate of return is because of the magic compound interest. You see, compound interest is something that could work for you or it could work against you. 9 out of 10 times, a lot of people are using it against you. So how can we start using compound interest in our best interest? Well, first thing you got to learn is something called the rule of 72. Now, if you never learned of the rule of 72, a very, very smart man named Albert Einstein said, this is so good, it's like the 8th wonder of the world when he learned about compound interest. Now, the rule of 72 says, if you take 72 and you divide by whatever interest you're receiving on your money, this equals the amount of years it takes for your money to double for you or against you. So let me give you an idea. Imagine that the bank gave you 1%, which we know they don't, but let's say that they did. If the bank gave you 1%, you got to take 72 and then divide it by 1. So that means it's 1 going to 72 times. So that means it would take you 72 years for your money to double inside a bank. So if you had $100, it would take you 72 years for that $100 to become $200. My question to you is, do you have 72 years to wait if your bank gave you 1%? We're trying to live to see 72. The issue is none of us understand how compound interest work for us and how it could work against us. So what you got to do is this. Here's your homework. First thing you got to do, homework. I need you to know what is the APR and the interest on your credit cards. What is the interest on your mortgage? What is the interest on your student loans? What is the interest on your investments? And what you got to do is take whatever that interest is, divide it into 72, and guess what? The number you get is the amount of years it takes for that money to double for you, or it's going to double against you. Think about that, right? That's the reason why you got to understand compound interest. Now, the big issue is a lot of people say, hey, I get good interest on my investments, Keyon. How do I know if I'm getting the real rate of return? What is the real rate of return that you're receiving? It's a really simple formula. Let me break it down and give you an example. Let's say that you save $100, right? And you earn 3% interest on this $100 every year. So for every 3% that you earn on the 100, you make $3. So now you make $3. Then let's calculate taxes. How that's going to impact you. Let's say that the taxes right now is at 25%. This is a combination of federal and state tax, right? So now you got to pay taxes on the gains. Remember, in America, you don't pay taxes on the principal, you pay taxes on the gains. So now you got to pay tax on that $3 gain of 25%. 25% is 75 cents. Now, after taxes, you're left with $102.25. Now, here's the big issue. Then we got to calculate how does inflation is going to affect my money. Now, let's say that inflation is at 3.5%. What does that mean for my money? That means that I got to take away $3.50. And now, after taxes and inflation, I'm only left with $98.75. So do you realize that even if you're earning a 3% interest on your investments, you will lose? You're going to lose because after taxes and inflation, you are losing the money game. So one of the things that we have actually teach and we tell people and let you understand that if you're not earning 5% or better on your investments, you're not winning the money game because you got to keep up with inflation and taxes. And that's always been a big issue. Many families don't know what inflation is. So let me break down what inflation is, guys. Inflation is known to be like a silent killer. It's like carbon monoxide. If you be around it, you stay around it too long, you're going to die from it. But you can't smell it, you can't taste it. So inflation is like that to our money. Imagine the fact that how does inflation happen? What is inflation? Inflation is pretty much represent whatever the rise of price of goods and services are. Okay? So when the price increase, it means that your purchasing power decreases over time. Now, how does inflation happen? Inflation happens when our country, the Federal Reserve, every time they continue to print more money and put it out in the economy, we are losing value. Rich or poor, we're losing value of our money. That's why some people refer to inflation as a hidden tax system in our current monetary system. Guys, we got to pay attention to this. We really got to pay attention to this. Did you know that in the last 100 years, from 1914 to 2014, our U.S. inflation rate averaged 3.32%? Did you know that? And what does that mean for me and you? That means that, let's say that we plan. Let's say that we're planning to retire, right? And today we're going to make a plan based upon the cost of things today. Let's say that we say, hey, we're going to need $4,000 in our retirement later on to come, right? We're 30 years old today. And we say we're going to need $4,000 when we reach 65 to retire. Let's say that 20 years later gone by, right? Let's say that 20 years later gone by and we're ready to retire, right? We want to retire 20 years from now. Let's say that inflation was only at 3%, all right? Only at 3%. Did you know the new need will be $7,224 versus the $4,000 that you planned for? That's the effect of inflation, guys. You got to start keeping in mind inflation. How many of us is planning our retirement and we're calculating what inflation will be for us? Not many. Not many of us is planning these things. Not many of us is talking about this. When the last time your financial advisors tell you that, hey, inflation is going to affect how you live and how you actually eat later on to come? That's the reason why the wealth formula even talks about minus taxes. Why? It's because Benjamin Franklin said it best. Benjamin Franklin said, there's nothing certain in this world except for death and taxes. OMG. How right is that? Right? Imagine this. Imagine when you make money, they're going to tax you. Imagine when you save your money, they're going to tax you. Imagine when you spend your money, they tax you. Even when you die, they still tax you. You can't even rest in peace. Isn't that crazy? So this is the reason why we got to understand that taxes, you cannot predict what taxes will be in the future. Taxes is unpredictable. So this is why we got to understand how our money will be taxed when we need it. Now, you got to pay attention. There's three ways, guys. I talked about this earlier. You got to know your tax tolerance. There's three ways your money get taxed when you need it. Your money get taxed now, you get taxed later, and it can also get taxed never. The issue is many of us never got taught how to not get taxed upon distribution. Now let's talk about where your money get taxed now. Tax now means the money is taxable. That means they're going to tax you upon the gains when you start taking distribution. These are in your checking account, savings account, CDs, stocks, and mutual funds. These are just a few examples of vehicles that get taxed now. Then you have what's called tax later, also known as tax deferred. Tax deferred vehicles is where you put your money in your 401ks, 403bs, 457s, IRAs, SEP IRAs, annuities, and pensions. These vehicles are known to get taxed later, meaning that they're going to tax you later on every withdrawals, and all of the money that's in these vehicles are also taxed as ordinary income. You got to wait till 59 and a half to touch this money. and you got to start taking it before your 72th birthday, or you will lose 50% of the money. Did you know that? They also got management fees, and it's tied to the market fluctuation. That's why you got to also know what's your risk tolerance. See, these are important things that we got to learn in order to be in front of the money game. Now, the next thing we got to learn is this. What is tax advantages? What are tax advantages? Now, tax advantages means that you don't pay taxes on the withdrawal. So a lot of people use things like a Roth IRA, 529 college savings plan, municipal bonds, health savings account, life insurance, long-term care benefits. These vehicles give you a lot of tax advantages, which means that you pay your taxes now, and later on when it grows, you don't pay taxes on the gains. You don't pay taxes on the gains. You only pay taxes on the seed. It's almost like, which one would you rather pay taxes on? Would you rather pay taxes on the seed, or would you like to pay taxes on the harvest? If you're smart like I know you are, you would always choose to pay tax on the seed and never the harvest. The harvest is what you need for your retirement years to come. That's the reason why you gotta pay attention. How do you want to be taxed in your retirement years to come? So ultimately, what's important to you? Growth or safety? Think about this. What would you want? Write this down. Growth or safety in your money? Now, as you sit there and you're thinking about this, growth or safety? You see, when you think about safety, right? When people think about safety for their money, guess what you guys put that money? You put that money in the bank. You put that money in the bank, right? When you want safety. But when you want to grow your money, most people have to do what? They want to go invest their money. So the problem is that when you want growth, you may lose. And when you want safety, you may not get growth. It's almost like a catch-22. How do you win? How do you win? The problem is that, guys, no one educated you on where you can put your money in one spot. You can put your money in one spot and get growth, safety, tax advantages, and protection in one spot. Why no one teaches us about this? The reason why no one is teaching you about it is because the banks and the big financial institutions do not want you to learn what they know. How about this? What I teach you is where to put your money, like where the bank is putting your money. You think the bank is keeping the money in the safe? Do you think the bank is really keeping the money in the safe? No, the bank is putting the money where you don't know where to put your money. And that's what I'm teaching. So if you want to learn where to put your money, where the bank is putting your money, and learn how to get growth, safety, tax advantages, and protection like the bank do for when they put your money into that particular vehicle, that's what we want to teach you. So all you got to do is simple, guys. Reach out, click the link, and schedule a session. Let me teach you where the bank is putting your money and show you how to create your own bank. You can even text me, 973-873-5977. Or you can reach out and click the link. And that way we can start teaching you how to create your own bank so that way you could start winning the money game as well. It's time for you to learn how to win the money game. Guys, one place you can put your money and get all four things. You don't have to spread your money out, and you don't have to diversify your portfolio, and you don't have to spread the risk. Let's get rid of risk and start improve on growth and have safety. So when the market goes down negative, you're still getting a positive return. Let's have a money talk. I see you guys at the top. My name is Keyon Corniffe, also known as Mr. Finance, your favorite financial educator and business coach. And I look forward to continue empowering you and teaching you not only the knowledge, but also give you the understanding so that way you can take the necessary actions to continue winning the money game for you and your family. I'll talk to you guys soon. See you at the top.